Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I'd like to talk about groin pain. And the reason why I think it's a really important topic to discuss is that despite all that we know about groin pain, all the things that we know to treat groin pain, I still see a lot of misconceptions about what groin pain is and how it happens. So in today's video, I just want to cover the two most common, the two biggest root causes of almost all groin pain. So that can be osteitis pubis, that can be groin tears, tendonitis, potentially things like hernias and sports hernias and things like that as well. Obviously they're a little bit different, but still can be lumped into this same conversation. And the reason why I think this is really important is because one of the hallmarks of the industry at the moment, one of the things that a lot of Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today what I'd like to talk about is groin pain. Now, the reason why I find groin pain really interesting is that there is often a lot of misconceptions about A, what groin pain actually is, and B, how it happens, what causes that to happen. So I think the hallmarks of a lot of groin pain, and this sort of speaks to the way that I guess the medical industry thinks still at the moment, is that when we look at groin pain, whether that's osteitis pubis, whether that's a tear in the groin muscle, tendonitis, even some hernias, some sports hernias, we're very, very quick to look at that as a very isolated problem. So if you've got a tear in your groin, or if you've got some bone stress through your pubic area, we're very keen to look at that and say, well, look, that area is not strong enough, maybe it's too tight. There's all these local issues that set that up to fail. But again, time and time again, it's not until you take a step back that you sort of realize that yes, that area has become a problem, but it's only become a problem because all this other dysfunction has set that up to fail. So again, as always, when we go through, I guess, an exercise to address one of the two main causes of groin pain, of any groin pain to be fair, we want to make sure that those exercises are specifically targeted to the root cause of those issues. So that all the complementary things that people do, and as physical therapists we do this really well in terms of rehabbing the injury once it's there. I want these two exercises to, I guess, be things that you can lean on and say, right, I'm going to do both of these exercises and see what that does for me. See if I can find some dysfunction with those exercises and then see what positive effect it has on my groin issue. Now, again, it's always important to distinguish. There are times when you can just injure something, but they're not as common as we think they are. If you are running, if you are changing direction or cutting and you feel a tweak in your groin, yes, that was the moment that your groin became injured or sore, but again, there's likely to be some hidden or some covert factors that were at play there that you just didn't realize because your body didn't need you to. It didn't care enough at the time until it got to a point where the tolerance of that sort of tissue was surpassed. So most groin issues tend to come out of nowhere. They sort of build up over time. But for those that have those acute injuries and maybe tear something or damage something, just remember that these principles still apply. Think of those moments as the moment that tissue failed, not the moment that it went from perfect to imperfect, but it went from imperfect to imperfect enough for that tissue to fail. So with that in mind, we'll touch on these two ideas, but if you can keep that in the back of your mind, it's really important because it helps frame the bigger picture of how to solve groin pain, how to stop it from coming back, and how to get through your rehab a little bit faster. So the first reason that we see, one of the main causes of groin pain is hip stiffness. You can have an impinged hip, the capsule around the hip joint can be stiff, a lot of the musculature around the hip joint can be tight, and it can refer pain to the groin. But also, if you're lacking that range of motion at the major joint that your groin attaches to and around, then you can sort of transfer that dysfunctional load to anything around that. And those groin muscles, those adductors, even your abdominal muscles as they come down on top of that, can be forced to take up some of the slack. And if you're an athletic person or if you're doing something athletic and your groin starts to become a problem, we need to make sure that you're clearing that asymptomatic hip dysfunction. And a lot of that, again, is just stiffness. So the way that I'd like to sort of highlight this exercise is one we've done before. It's the hip joint capsule stretch. So you can use a power band, a stretcher band to do this. I'll do it without it today just to show. So the idea here is we want to get you into a position where, and this isn't the position, but we want to get you into a position where we're putting some pressure through the hip joint to stretch the posterior aspect of the capsule. And for those who are unaware, the capsule is basically, you've got your ball and socket joint of the hip. So for me, it would look more like this on this side here. If we were to wrap that up in a really thick plastic wrap, a really strong connective tissue, that's your hip joint capsule. And unfortunately, because we sit a lot, we do a lot of things where we're stuck in the same hip position for hours on end, that hip joint capsule can become stiff and tight. So instead of being able to express full rotation, flexion, adduction, adduction, whatever it may be, flexion, extension, that capsule essentially puts a clamp on the hip joint, and you can start to jam into things. You can butt into the hip, it can become impinged. You can start to create some dysfunction. You can set the tendons up around that to fail in terms of the adductors. You can start to lay the foundation for groin dysfunction, whether that is actual injury, tissue damage, or tendonitis, or anything like that. So we want an exercise to free that hip joint up. And a really simple way to do this is to pop down onto your hands and knees, just to test this out. So we're going to do this hip. And again, if you've seen these videos before, you'll know where we're going with this, but we want to make sure that you take your opposite leg back without knocking over a pot plant. We want to keep your chest and trunk parallel to the ground. We want everything to move across towards the side that you're trying to stretch. So what we're trying to do here is we're keeping our hips and shoulders level, and we're moving everything over that hip, over that knee, on the side that you're trying to stretch. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get your thigh bone to push out the back corner of your hip. So in this area, sort of through here, we want to come across. You can come down or up, depending on where you feel gives you the best access to that position. And for me, I can feel a nice stretch just here. So at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm just putting some gentle pressure through the joint capsule. I'm going to stay here for a minute or 2 minutes until that tissue starts to give the hips some more slack, feed some slack into that, give it some more room to move, and sort of take away one of the main tenets of why groin pain tends to occur. So the best thing about this stretch is that it's very versatile. So not only do we want to get you into this position, but we also want to create some rotation as well. So we can rotate your foot under your back, your other leg, and drop that back leg down to block it. And then we're going to hit the external rotation part of your hip capsule. So we can come back across to the same position that we did before. So hips and shoulders move together. We're not trying to twist and drop the other hip down to the ground. We're just trying to shovel across, and you might find that this time, instead of the pressure being here, it's going to be more into the back of the hip where that back pocket is. That's great. This is just an extra tight part of the capsule for a lot of people. Again, once you've done that for a minute or two, then we can do the opposite. We can extend the other leg, then rotate that leg out as far as you feel comfortable before your hip and back start to tweak. So you want to keep everything still, just rotate out whatever range you have, and then again come across the same position as the other two, over to that side, put some pressure on it. You'll find that the pressure this time isn't at the back or at the side, it's a little bit more towards the front, so it's not in the groin. So it's important to remember that if you come across here and you feel like you're getting some groin pain, your groin pain, or it's impinging the hip, it's jamming that hip up, then just don't be in as much hip flexion. So come out of that position a little bit more. So if you're right down in here, you're all the way across, which is effectively adducting the hip, and that hip's internally rotated, it's very easy to jam that up. So just come out of that position a little bit more. We're looking for all that comfortable pressure through the side and nothing jamming that up. So what you should find after doing that is that hip joint should feel a lot more mobile, potentially compared to the other one. And then over time, over a matter of days, weeks potentially, that hip's going to start to move a lot better. It's not going to be as tight or stiff. And very quickly, provided that your symptoms can change this way, you should feel like you start to see some incremental changes. You should see some progress. As we always say, if you're not seeing change in terms of mobility straight away or pain and dysfunction over time, then you're not making that change. So there's no excuses for not seeing progress. If you don't see progress, you need to ask some specific questions to the right people. That could be yourself, as to why that's not changing, because it should change. Your body is supposed to be good all the time. If it's dysfunctional for too long, then there's a reason why that dysfunction's there. We just need to figure out what it is. So that's number one. So trying to feed some slack into the hip joint allows the groin and all the groin tissue to function better. It can be a direct mechanical compromise where that hip joint's stiff, forces all the tissue around it to function differently, of which the groin can suffer. Or it can be more of a referred pattern where the hip's jamming up and it's giving you pain or a sensation of pain in your groin. And that alone can create tightness and dysfunction as well. So either way, we want to make sure that you're clearing that hip joint without stirring up any pain that you have, but you can do that quite effectively with that hip joint capsule stretch. So the second thing, and for the life of me, this is missed a lot. I'd almost guarantee that the majority of anyone watching this video who has had groin pain, or if you're interested in trying to understand groin pain better, very rarely do I see anyone checking out the lower back. And for good reason, I guess, because most people's backs don't hurt. So same thing with a stiff hip joint. If you have some low back dysfunction in some very specific areas, and they tend to be the ones that line up with, I guess, it can be the nerves that supply the groin, but it can also be things called dermatomes, which are basically the levels of your spine that tissue develops from in the embryonic phases. And there's these neural connections that are left over that can tend to generate pain and dysfunction. We just miss all the time because, again, that low back may not hurt, but if there's dysfunction there, it can set a chain reaction of events off to set that groin up to fail, much like it can the hamstring, the quads, the calves, pelvic floor. Same thing with the neck and shoulders and the arms as well. So it's a really important one to I guess look into if you have groin pain. Any groin pain, it can be anything at all, particularly hernias, pubic bone dysfunction and those groin tears and all those sorts of things can all be set up to fail by some lower back dysfunction. So for me, the areas that we're most interested in are the base of your rib cage, that T11, T12 area, and the top half of your upper back, your lower back, sorry. So that L1, 2, 3, maybe 4. But the idea that I want to promote with this is we don't necessarily want you to just go looking at one level, because again, your body doesn't function as one level, it functions as a section, functions as a whole. So what we want to do is we want to start with something like a foam roller. You can do the same thing with a lacrosse ball or a tennis ball. We want to lie on the roller. We don't want to roll. We just want to find a spot, let it press in, move from side to side, just to check out which side of your spine feels the stiffest. Stay there for a few seconds and then just segmentally move the roller down, looking for the areas that feel stiff and tight. Now, we'll go through this in a second, but it's really important that you don't get seduced by pain or tenderness, or a lack of pain and tenderness, because we seem to judge everything of value in terms of injuries and things, in terms of does it hurt, yes or no. And if it doesn't hurt, it doesn't matter. If it does hurt, that's when it becomes a problem. But we know that if something's rusty, that may not be the piece that fails in a machine, but it may cause something else to fail because that machine's now functioning differently. We see the same thing with the lower back all the time. So what we want to do is we want to go looking for this dysfunction if there is some. So again, I'm going to start at the base of my rib cage. I'm just going to lie down on top of the roller. So for me, this feels a little bit stiff here. So again, I'm not interested in rolling because we're trying to affect the deeper joints, the joint stiffness in the spine. If we roll over the top of it, we're never really getting any constant pressure through the joints. It's just superficial pressure and it won't do anything long term. So again, please feel free to have a pillow or something behind you. If you're flexible enough, you can lift your bottom up and let your head rest on the ground. And then to find some tension, so for me in this area, I need a little bit more tension. So I'm just going to drop my pelvis down as low as I feel comfortable. And I'm going to lean across to this side. See how that feels. It feels a little bit stiff for me. Come across to the other side, doesn't feel like anything at all. So for me, it tells me that this left-hand side, or the side closest to the camera, is the side that I need to put some pressure on. And I just want to stay here. I just want to stay here for a couple of seconds until I feel like that starts to give. Then once I'm satisfied that that's changed, I then want to move the roller down to the next level. Do the same thing again. Again, it's probably going to be stiff on the same side, which it is. So I want to spend some time working on this. Now, what you might find here, if you're lucky, when you put some pressure on one particular level, so maybe this side of the spine doesn't feel stiff or tight, but it hurts, but this side just feels stiff and tight, you actually want to spend most of your time on this side because that's where the stiffness is, even though the pain or someone's pain might be here. So if you have groin pain on this side and you put some pressure on that part of your back on the same side and it generates your pain, then you know that that's the level that's connecting to that groin pain. But significantly, you don't have to get sucked into pushing through the same side if it doesn't feel stiff. So as I said, you don't want to get seduced by the pain or tenderness. You want to go hunting for stiffness. So you've got to spend the most time on the side that feels stiff. Your body doesn't care about left and rights so much. Again, if your back is stiff on this side, for example, it's still going to pull some slack and affect everything around that spot. It doesn't just stop at that imaginary divide that we've determined in left and rights. It's probably not imagining there's a spine there, but you get the point. The idea is that your body functions as a whole. It doesn't function as a specific level or a particular side, because it's all connected together. So if you have that stiffness and that tightness in the base of your rib cage or the top of your lower back, again, it can pull some slack out of the nerves that supply the groin muscles and create that mechanical dysfunction that way. But it can also shut down a lot of the muscles around the hip. So we've done a previous video, which I'll link up here, that has a lot to do with why that same section of your lower back can deactivate your glutes, giving you the sensation that you're weak, when actually you're not weak. It's just though the signals that control those muscles have been diminished. So once you take that handbrake off the spine, those glutes waking up again relatively quickly, get your power and your strength back. So that decreased glute function can then obviously affect the tissue of the groin and set that up for failure as well. So I think the main thing to get out of today's video is I just wanted to touch on that if you've got any groin pain at all, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter how you got it, whether you feel like it's related or not, you owe it to yourself to go looking through your hip joint to see how stiff and tight that is, and go looking through the base of your lower back and your rib cage to see how stiff and tight that is. Because again, neither of those two may be painful themselves, but handbrakes in those areas can absolutely cause some havoc for groin function, as well as other areas clearly. But for the purposes of this video, any groin issues at all, you've got to clear those two areas, otherwise you haven't solved the main root causes of those problems. So hopefully that gives you a bit of direction. If you have any questions about, if you have any specific groin issues that you want a little bit more specific advice on, please let us know in the comments below. Also, if you found that information useful, we'd always appreciate you leaving a like in the video. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. It just helps these videos get out to more people. And obviously the dream is that, in a perfect world, anyone who has any groin dysfunction would see a video like this and would hopefully give them a really strong understanding of why things have happened the way they have. And then when you go and see someone to get that specific individualized treatment regime that we're very good at giving as physical therapists, you're also understanding the broader spectrum of why that's there, and you've got to treat those things as well. So again, hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll catch you next time.